Welcome back to another iOS programming lecture. Here at Rose-Hulman, we're starting to wind down. It's week 9 of 10 here at Rose-Hulman. So we're starting to come towards the end of video lectures. Now that being said, it does not mean the material's value is going down at all. If anything, the value of the material is still going up, especially with this example. So this example is going to be the first one we do that's going to have multiple views in it. So if you look at where we're at in terms of the schedule, you can see that there's a lot of different major course objectives with persistence. And then this example is going to be where we really get into the heart of view controller controllers. So we did modal views, and that was all well and good. So we did the modal views and popovers, and that was a great video lecture, or a great topic. But now we're going to get into really making custom view controllers. You can see that in the class this took like 3 days to get through, so we'll probably do 2 video lectures out of it. So that's going to be the focus of today's. There are really 4 ways that you can typically manage multiple views in an app. So typically an app will pop up and it won't be the one screen. It'll be like a menu screen, then you'll go to another screen, yada yada yada. There are really 4 good ways to do this. One is to make your own custom root view controller. So you'll make a class. I typically just call mine root view controller. And it'll take care of putting all the different views on and then taking them off at appropriate times. Custom root view controllers is technically what we've been doing whenever we have a single view controller. Technically that also fits this style, but really we're focusing on when there's multiple view controllers and you're managing them. The other options are the built-in Apple options. One is the tab bar controller. We'll play with the same example with the tab bar controller. Another is a navigation controller. We'll play with a navigation controller as well. These are Apple's solutions to putting view controllers' views up on the screen and taking those view controller views off of the screen and managing them. And then on the iPad, there's a new one called the UI Split View Controller. And we'll play with the Split View Controller as well, but it won't be with this example. We're going to make up a different dual browser example for that one. So this is most similar, what we're going to do today, to what was done in Chapter 6. If you're using the beginning iPhone 3 development, it was in Chapter 6. And what this one was this was taking one view controller called the blue view controller, and then when you clicked on switch views, it would put up the yellow view controller. And these were actually different view controllers, and the book had a really good example. The one thing the book did that we're not going to do is the book made life a lot easier by at the bottom here, this was the root view controller was always visible at all times. But actually that's not what happens in a lot of apps. Like a lot of apps, like you click on something and then that screen goes away entirely and a fresh screen comes up. So the app that we're going to implement will be where it doesn't have anything of the root visible ever. So when it's not visible at all. So having it visible at the bottom here actually made that app much easier, but we won't give you that luxury in this example. The example that we're going to do is this one. We have made already 6 view controllers. These 6 view controllers correspond to these 6 views, so these are the views of those view controllers. There's going to be a main menu that's going to pop up, and it's going to have 2 buttons on it. If you push the campus map button, it'll go to this view, which has the campus map on it. This view has a little bit of information about Rose-Hulman. That's the school where this class takes place. A little information on here. And then it's also got a campus map. So there are kind of 2 parts on this view controller. In code, I call it the Rose-Hulman Info View Controller, but it's also got a campus map. Then if you press the Academic Buildings button, it'll take you into one of these 4. It'll take you into Munch Hall is where we start you. From Munch Hall, you can walk over into Hadley Hall. So if you were to click Hadley Hall, it would open up this screen. You could walk down into Crapo Hall, and it would take you down into this screen. Then if you click back to Munch, it would go back up to here. And then to the left of Munch is Myers Hall. So the idea of this app is these view controllers have been made for you. We're going to download the code from the website here in just a sec. They've all been made for you And your job in this app is to simply put them up and take them down at the appropriate times. Sounds like a pretty easy task, but it's non-trivial. Just putting them up and taking them down is going to take a little bit of work and a lot of coordination. If you've done programming in other development environments, you know that coordination between objects is non-trivial. So figuring out how you do that coordination is a big part of development. There are actually 12 objects we're going to be coordinating with. The view controller, which is an object, and then also the view controller's view. So the view controller's view is the one you can see. So that last screen, you could see the view controller's view. And the idea is just the view is going to have to be added to the view hierarchy, whereas the view controller is just going to have to be managed. The strategy with the view is actually quite simple. There's going to be a parent object called root view controller. Root view controller is a view controller that has a view. The root view controller is going to always be blank. So it's just going to be a blank white view. And the way this is going to work is, when appropriate, the root view controller is going to take this view controller's view and add it as a subview. When it's added as a subview, it'll be visible. And then when it doesn't want that one anymore, it'll remove that one and it'll add somebody else to the root view controller's view. And so that's how this app is going to be driven, with that root view controller object. So let's go ahead and get started. Go ahead and open up Xcode. Go ahead and open up a new project. This project, what we're going to do is we're going to do a window-based template for the iPhone. So we're going to do a window-based iPhone. Usually we only have done window-based when we're doing universal, but this time I want window-based iPhone because I don't want that tie-in to a single view controller like the other template does. And let's go ahead and call this example Rose-Hulman buildings. So Rose-Hulman buildings. And as always, I've done it once before, so I'm going to have to call mine video. And when you open it up, you'll see that it gives you by default an app delegate. It also gives you, the basic frameworks that are in there, but really not much else. The main Windows zip file, which is important, but not a whole lot else. But what we want to do is we want to give you all of these pieces of starting code. If you want to go and download them, you can click on the link in the slides, and that will be one way you can download them. You can also go to the calendar page, and there's starting code here, and you can download the starting code from there if you'd like as well. Looks like my download is done. Let's go show it in the Finder. Inside this starting code, there should be a whole bunch of classes, so .h, .m files, a bunch of images that we've used in the creation of this app, one sound effect, you can listen to it later, and then a bunch of zip files. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this starting point and just that folder that expanded, we're just going to drag it over. Looks like I've done it multiple times. I'll drag the one over without the little one parentheses on it. So to drag it over, I'll make both visible here. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to drag it from here into other sources. I'm going to copy the items over, and then I'm going to click on Add. And so now these files that I've given you are part of this project. And again, what these files are is these are a bunch of view controllers that are not connected to anything, but they're all of those different view controllers. We could have had you make them, but it just would have made this example take that much longer. Cool. So now we've got all those files. Important step. Next we're going to start making some additional changes. The first changes we're going to make is we're going to go ahead and make some changes to the icon file in the info.plist, the display name, and then also I'm going to go ahead and say that this one doesn't run in the background, and I'm going to set that flag. So let's go ahead and do those things. So inside your info.plist, I do things kind of fast, but it's a video, so you can always pause it. I'm going to make the icon file be ricon.png. That should be one of the images that you brought over. So it should be this image. The other thing I want to do is I want to make the display name be Rose Building. If you add the S, it makes it look bad, so I just said Rose Building. Good enough. And then if you don't want it to run in the background, you can add another another key, and application does not run in background. I'm going to check mark that. The reason I want that is because, one, it doesn't do anything in the background, and two, there's going to be something that I'm going to do. I'm going to play that sound only when it first loads. So I guess you don't have to have that one, but it's the way I set up this app. So let's talk some more. Let's go ahead and run it and make sure that it actually does something. So when you run it, what it should do is it should at least have the correct display name if you close it, and it should have the icon set up. So hopefully those things are working. You can see I'm actually using the 4.2 version because you can see it actually looks like an iPhone, which is fun. Ooh, looks like I've got a finished version on here too. Let's take that off. And so when it runs, it should have the icon, it should have the display name. Also, if you watched it close, there was a screen that went by that's kind of gray. We'll talk about that in just a second. Cool. So the structure of this app is going to look like this. We're going to have these 6 different view controllers, and they're going to need to communicate information to the root. So like when this button is pressed, this view controller doesn't know how to deal with it, so he just has to tell root, and then root will handle it. The way you handle this communication is through delegates and protocols. So really a big part of this lecture is about how do you make your own delegates and how do you make your own protocols. So each of these view controllers is going to have an IVAR called delegate, and it's going to be pointing to the root view controller. So this is a concept that we've used a lot with Apple's built-in classes, but this will be the first time that we've made our own delegate, like from scratch. The delegate approach is very common with parent-child relationships. And one important concept that you should keep in mind is anytime there's kind of like a parent object, so the best example here is the one that Apple gives. So let's say you had an object for a document, for a page, and then a paragraph. A page would retain, or sorry, a document would retain the page. The page would then retain the paragraph, but you can't retain backwards, right? So you can't retain the other direction. If you've used other languages, like Java, you typically do this all the time. Like when you create a constructor, you get passed in the parent, and then you save a pointer to the parent. In Objective-C, since you're responsible for memory management, you can't retain it, but you can make it an assign IVAR. So the typical style looks like this. The parent implements a protocol. Here I've just called it the delegate protocol. So he's going to implement this protocol. The parent also has an IVAR to the child, and this one is usually a specific type of class, and so it points directly at the child, and he retains the child. Whereas what the child object does is the child object will define a protocol that his delegate must implement, and then he will have a delegate IVAR. Typically the delegate is of type ID, so it can be any type of object, but then you add this additional constraint that says it can be any type of object so long as it implements this protocol. So the parent will implement that protocol, and the child will have an assigned IVAR to the parent called delegate. And so this is a very common structure that you'll see in Objective-C, and it's great that we're getting to see it. Sorry it took till 9th week till we showed you this very important concept. So the steps that are going to happen is the parent is going to be responsible for handling the memory management of the child. The child is going to be responsible for creating the protocol, creating the delegate IVAR, creating a property that enforces the protocol, and then the child will call those delegate methods, and then it'll be up to the parent to implement that protocol, and then also at some point you have to set the delegate to be the parent. So what I've done is I've gone ahead and made a checklist, just because this is a very long example, and I've made a checklist so that we can kind of go through and check things off as we do them. And so there are 6 different view controllers. So let's just kind of hop back to, there's 6 different view controllers. So there are 6 child objects. Instead of having 6 independent protocols, these four with the academic calls are so similar that we're going to kind of do them all together. So we've kind of reduced it down to 3 independent protocols. So what I've done is I've made a checklist for the menu. We've got to set up his protocol and delegate and all that. The Rose-Hulman info view, which is also the map, we've got to do all of his. And then for all the halls, we've got to do all this checklist. And this checklist is just the things from the prior slide that I said have to get done. And we'll get to refer to this as kind of an overview of where we're at as we're making this program. Just kind of for a quick look at what this looks like in code, is if we were looking at the child class, here the child class has a delegate protocol called child class delegate. This is a standard form, is you just say the same name as the class, add the word delegate, and that's typically the name of the protocol. They just add the word delegate. The iVar is type ID. In the property, it's an assign, and it must implement this. And the protocol typically, when the way I write them, at least, I put it before the interface, so I have to say at class, at child class, just so the protocol knows about the existence of this class. Whenever you're making a protocol for a delegate, the first object that's passed should be a pointer to that child object. So I've kind of done that here. Once we get into it, you'll get the feel of it better. So the first thing that we're going to need to add to our project is we're going to have to add this root view controller. It's going to be the parent to all these children. So let's just go ahead and make it in classes. So go ahead and say add, new file. We want to make a UI view controller. We do not need a zip file. And we do not need to target it for iPad because this is an all iPhone thing. So no check marks, but a subclass of UI view controller, and call it root view controller. Cool. So that one's done. And what the root view controller is going to look like is he's going to eventually implement all of these different protocols. And so you say that you implement something in the header file, and then in the implementation file you actually do it. And so he'll implement these protocols, and then he'll also have iVars to all 6 of these children. So the 2 tasks that root view controller is going to have to do is he's going to have to do the memory management for all these children. He's going to have to make use of lazy loading whenever he does that. And then when he implements these protocol methods, what he's going to have to do is he's going to have to deal with the view hierarchy. So he's going to have to add the view to the screen when it's appropriate, take it down when it's appropriate, and he's going to become the delegate of all the different view controllers. And we're going to use some pretty animations when we put things up and down. So we're going to try to show you how to make use of animations as well. So let's go ahead and start making some of the connections that we've done in this. So we'll go ahead and do the things that we've done many times, which is we're going to, in the header file, make a pointer to a root view controller. So it's of type root view controller, and I just called it lowercase r root view controller. So it's going to be an IB outlet, because we're going to make it over in the zip file. And then while we're here, we may as well get the other steps done. So we're going to import root view controller.h. We're going to synthesize the iVar. The most important step is to add, so many little changes. It used to just say window, now it says self.window. Again, pretend like I'm not using 4.2 because it's not released to everyone yet, but it won't matter. Root view controller dot view. What I did there, by the way, is I just saved it real quick just so my code completion would work better. And then if we want to be a good memory management citizen, down below in Delegate, we will simply take root view controller and release it. Cool. So here we've made a pointer for it. The next thing we need to do is we need to actually create it inside the main window zip file. So here we're going to create an instance of that class. So I'm going to just drag over UI view controller, and then I'm going to change to say instead make me a root view controller. And then what we need to do is we need to connect to the root view controller. So at this point it should display the root view controller's view up on the screen. The only trouble is if we don't put anything in it, it looks white, which is just what it did before. So just as a really quick test, this is temporary. I just want to turn it blue just so that you know that it is actually up there. So inside the root view controller.m, I'm just going to add a real quick self.view.background color is UI color blue color. This is just so that we know that it actually is in fact showing the root view controller's view. And there it is. It came up blue, so it's definitely working. The other thing you might have noticed when you run it is this gray screen. I kind of mentioned it before. What that's all about is that is the default.png. So while something is loading, you can show an image if you'd like. To be honest, what most developers do here is they put like a company logo or something like that, and Apple says that's not really the point of that system. The point is that you can present something that like gets the user accustomed to, you know, what your app is going to be. So in this case, I just made it a blank screen. Maybe it should have had the R up there. So while it's loading, it'll show that screen. Just to talk a little bit more about this, if you're doing it just for the iPad, you typically will use default.png. Sorry, just for the iPhone, you'll just use default.png. If you're doing it for the iPad, you should use either portrait or landscape, default/portrait or default/landscape. And the nice thing is if you're making a universal app, you can use these two for iPad and then this one for iPhone, and it works great. Also, if you want specific things for like the different landscapes or the different portraits, you could use those as well. Typically, I just use these bottom three. And if it's just an iPhone app, I'll just use this default.png. So if you look into the files that we gave you, one of them is called default.png, and you can see that's what's getting displayed while it's loading. So a little tangent point there. So let's go ahead and work on adding our first view controller's view onto the screen. So we've got a view controller. We want to put his view right up on the screen. So we're going to start going through our checklist. The first thing we're going to have to do in our checklist is we're going to have to create an iVar to keep track of this thing. So we're going to go ahead and create a main menu view controller. Typically what I would do is I would only include the class main menu view controller here, and then I do the import in the other file. But since I know that I'm going to eventually be doing a protocol, I'm just going to go ahead and do the import right here in the .h file. And that works out fine. They recommend the other strategy because it's kind of it's a simpler way. It only does as much as you need and nothing more. Whereas this will import the header file for full use. So if somebody else includes this header file, it'll force everything upon them. In this program, it doesn't really matter which we had done. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and make use of the underscore naming convention. This is not a requirement for this app, but I'm going to go ahead and do it just so you get in the habit of doing it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the property inside the implementation file. That way it makes it private, right? So nobody else could call it. Again, that's not really important for this app, but I'm just kind of trying to get you used to doing that pattern. So it's a little bit of extra work to do that way. But what we're going to do is we're going to put the property non-atomic retain inside the .h file. And what we're actually doing here is we're creating a category. So you say at interface, just like we did before. But to make it not the exact same as this, a category has these parentheses, and then the name of the category goes inside the parentheses. For the internal one, I usually just leave it blank, and that works fine. So there's where we created our property. You can see I removed the underscore. And then I'm going to synthesize this property using the underscore ivar. And so this is a good way to keep things private and yet still make use of the memory management advantages that properties allow you. Being a good memory management citizen, I'm going to release it in Delegate. And if somehow my view goes away, I'll set it to nil. That's not going to happen. The view's not going to go away here, but it's a good habit to be in. Cool, and so now I've got a place to store this main menu view controller, so that's good. So I've done part of it. I've done the ivar property synthesize and release steps. I haven't yet allocated it. So I suppose I ought to go allocate real quick. So where we're going to allocate this thing is this is going to get created right when the view loads. So I'm just going to go ahead and allocate right inside the view did load for the root view controller. So I'm going to say main menu view controller, new main menu. I'm going to use the book style of creating it, then assigning it. Typically with view controllers, you want to use init with nibname. However, if you know that the zip file has the exact same name as the class, you can just use the init, and it will default to using the zip file that has the same name. And if you look at how I made these, that's how they all work. So the zip file for the main menu view controller and the class file, they already have the exact same name. So we're going to init it, and then we're going to say self.main menu view controller is equal to new main menu view controller, and then we can release the alloc one. Alloc puts the retain count at 1. This property puts the retain count up to 2. This release brings the retain count back down to just 1, so that if it gets released one more time, it'll be gone. So what we want to do is that makes the view controller, which is great. That puts it into the heap, but it doesn't make it visible. To make it visible, what we'll need to do is we'll need to say self.view, add the subview for self.mainMenuView, that view controller's view. And so now if we do this, it will create it, put it in the heap, and then it will actually display it on the screen. Oh, unless I make a typo somewhere. Oh, I forgot to put the underscore down in Delegate. In Delegate, what you should do, what's recommended, is that you use the ivar directly. The reason I recommend this is because calling the property, so like saying self dot, that actually might run other code that you don't want to do. And of course what I did is I left out the underscore, and that was nothing at all, because I could either say self dot, so I could either do it like this, or I could just use the ivar directly. We've talked about that in other lectures, so I should stop harping on it. Now you can see that it pops up with the view for the main menu view controller. The main menu view controller has a popover on it, which should already work. I don't even really count popovers whenever I'm thinking about like how the view controller works, because really popovers are just kind of, they're isolated, they're actually internal to this guy. Also, if you click on the link, it should open up Safari. Actually, this would be a good test, and the red button should become disabled whenever I click it, because our program is currently not set to run in the background. So when I click on that link, it takes me to the course website, which does not really look very good in this view, but oh well. Yeah, you can scroll down to what we're doing today. Custom view controllers, that's what we're doing. But you can see that it did pop up and show this. These buttons don't do anything yet, but I have connected them within the view controller, but from there they don't do anything. So we've got him set up. We did the step where we added the subview. Now it pops up with a modal view. The next thing we need to do is we need these buttons to actually cause some action. This is going to be a big step. This is a good time to take a short break. If you haven't paused yet, go ahead and pause it now. Take a break. So the setup is done, the boilerplate code is done, time to get down to business. When someone clicks on this button, I want this view controller to pop up, and then when somebody clicks on this button, I want this view controller to pop up. What I'm going to do is we're going to get this top one working all the way through. Once we finish with it, then we'll start on the bottom one. We'll probably do the bottom one in the next video lecture. So hopefully in this one we'll get this top one to where it'll show up. So what we're going to need to do is this main menu view controller is going to need to tell root when somebody clicked on these buttons. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a protocol inside the main menu view controller. So go ahead and find the main menu view controller.h. And you can see that I've put some to-dos in various places for you. So to-do, make a protocol for the main menu view controller delegate. So what this is going to look like is this. So we're going to make a protocol. It's going to be called main menu view controller delegate. And it's going to have two buttons in it based on what somebody, two methods in it based on what button somebody pressed. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and type them in, which means that I'll probably use slightly different names than what was in the notes, but that's fine. So I'm going to make this one, first one called be main menu, did press, Rose info, and then main menu, main menu, did press academic call. This first one is really Rose info / map. So I'm just going to say info / map. And whenever you're making a protocol for a delegate method, you should always pass back the object that called it. Oops, my auto formatter got a little ahead of me. And the thing that called it in this case is going to be a main menu view controller. And then, not being very clever with the name, I'll just call it main menu view controller. You can call it whatever you like. Main menu view controller. And another little gotcha is if you choose to put the protocol in before the interface, you'll have to do one additional thing. And I have to say, hey, a class is going to get created called main menu view controller. I know this is ridiculous, but it doesn't know about it at this point. It won't know about it until it gets to this line. So you just have to tell it, hey, it's going to be coming, so chill out, compiler. And then, sure enough, it'll get made down here. You could also put it below, but for some reason I like putting it above. Next thing we need to do, so there's our protocol, which is good. We're going to need to make a delegate. So we made an ivar called delegate. And then we're going to need to create a property for that delegate. The important thing here is that you use the word assign and not the word retain. And then also in the property, we only want somebody to become the delegate if they implement the main menu view controller delegate protocol. So it's kind of neat that you can enforce that only people can be set to this delegate if they enforce or if they implement this protocol. Then in the implementation file, it's very easy since we need to synthesize it because it's a property. But since it's not retained, we don't have to do any of that other dealloc stuff. So at this point, we've actually created the ivar, the property for it, and we're all set there. So those 3 steps, protocol, the ivar, and the property, are all done. And in the notes here, you can see what I chose to call, what I called things in the notes. You can see I used different words. I used walk around instead of academic calls. Next thing we're going to need to do is we're going to need to call those methods from the child. So this is another blue child activity. So let's call those those functions from the child. I'm going to go ahead and copy them real quick just so I don't mistype them. And so when somebody presses the walk around button, I want to, that's the academic hall one where they walk around. And if somebody presses the map button, that's the Rose info screen /map. So I want to call this method on the top button, and I want to call this method here. Copying and pasting gave me a starting point, but I need to actually call it. I want to call it on the delegate. So I'm going to say, hey delegate, call the function main menu did press academic hall. The thing I pass in is self, because I pass in who's calling this method on you. And same way down here, so self.delegate. Main menu did press Rose info, and then tell it the exact object that is calling this on him, and it is self. So at this point, we are calling our delegate. So the child's responsibilities are now done. He's got a protocol, he's got an ivar for a delegate, and he's going to call that delegate. Now it's up to the parent to do the rest. And so you can see I've got in code here what we did there. So the parent has to implement this protocol. So let's go up to, oops, what did I do? Let's go up to the parent. And let's start with the easy step. Let's start by saying, yes, we implement the main menu view controller delegate protocol. Saying you implement it is one thing, but then you actually have to go into the implementation file and make good on your word. What I always like to do is I like to add just little pound pragma blocks here. This is also nice because then you can hold down command and double click on the word and it'll take you to that protocol. Ooh, I forgot semicolons on these. Semicolon, semicolon. It would have thrown an error if I'd left them off, but these are like prototypes, so they need a semicolon at the end. And then if we jump back to root view controller.m and paste them in here, we don't need the semicolon, but we need curly braces to implement them. Let's start off with the most basic implementation. Let's just print out a message for what function we're in. So our classic __ function prints out C string. Great. So at this point, we have implemented the methods. We haven't implemented them well, so we claim we implemented it, and then we, put in a log message at least. Then the last step is we need to set the parent, so we need to set ourselves as the delegate of that child. Typically where you want to set yourself as the delegate is when you first make the thing. So up here we created it and then we added the view to the screen. Let's also, in addition to that, let's say self.main menu view controller, your delegate is me, is the parent. And so now when the child calls those methods, it'll call this object. So let's see if we've done anything useful. So let's open up the log screen. And so now when I click on this button, it should call that IB action, then that IB action should call the delegate, and we should see a message. So I click this one, voila. You can see that on the root view controller, it called main menu did press info map. And then if I press this one, it says on the root view controller, did press academic call. You can press them all you want. The only thing they will do is they will print a little message. But this actually implements an extremely important step. We've got it to where an object can tell its parent that action needs to take place. And we've done this whole delegate protocol system effectively. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to start with the, so we've got this working. We're going to start doing something, right? And what we're going to do is we're going to start the next round. So the next round is going to begin. We're going to do the map/info screen next. So to start up with this system, we're going to have to start by creating an IVAR, a property, the synthesis, you know, all the boilerplate fun. So let's go ahead, and we know that eventually this thing is going to have a protocol that we're going to have to implement. So instead of doing the class, we're just going to go and import the header file now. This one is called the Rose-Hulman info view controller. And we'll go ahead and make a Rose-Hulman info view controller called Rose-Hulman info view controller. Not very creative with my names. You can call your IVAR whatever you want. I just chose to call it that. I chose to make it an underscore just to kind of show you the design pattern for making your properties private. Something sounded dirty about the way I phrased it. So I went ahead and made the protocol or the property inside the implementation file. And I'm going to synthesize this property using the underscore IVAR. Being a good memory management citizen, I go ahead and release the IVAR if I get deallocated, and release it if my view gets unloaded as well. We'll actually get to see in this example when this might happen, like when the view might get unloaded. It won't happen with root, but it might happen to one of the others, or could happen with one of the others. So, all right, that was the boilerplate part. That was just setting up the IVAR property synthesis and the release. Now what we've got to do is we've got to actually allocate. The only place we're ever going to need an info view controller is when someone presses on that button. So whenever they press on this button, so what we're going to want to do is we want to lazy load an info view controller and then display it. So to lazy load something, the best way to do it is to say if self.Rose-Hulman info view is nil. So if nobody has ever needed this button before, so if nobody's ever pressed this button before, then it'll start off as nil. And if it is nil, let's make it. So if it is nil, we'll say new info. I got lazy on typing it. And whenever you make a view controller, you typically use init with nibname. But again here, the shortcut version init will work just fine because the zib file has the same name as the class file. Next, we'll go ahead and assign that to the IVAR. And then we will release it to bring its retain count back down to only 1. So now, regardless of whether it existed before or not, it definitely exists by this point in the code. And what we want to do to display it is we'll say self.Rose-Hulman info view controller. Oops, I'm doing it backwards. Self.view add subview self.Rose-Hulman info view controllers view. Not only do we want to display this view, but we want to take down the old one. So the old one that was up, and this is kind of weird, the old one that was up, let me get this typed first. was the main menu view. There we go. And the way you take something down is when you put something up, you say, like on the parent, like self.view, add subview, add this guy. But the way you remove something is actually on itself. So you say, this person, remove yourself. And so that's how you remove something. So if we run it now, it should call this function. It should make a Rose-Hulman info view, and it should add it to the screen. So that'd be kind of good. So if I click on the campus map, you can see that it goes ahead and it loads my Rose-Hulman info view controller, and it displays it to the screen. Looking at this info view controller a little bit more, it actually uses a UI scroll view in here, which is kind of neat. So you can see it's just got a little a PNG here, and you can pinch and zoom. And also I wanted to show you that you can manually set the zoom points, the offset. I wanted to cover scroll views in this class, I really did, but we just ran out of time. So here's some example code for how you use scroll views. The Stanford video with scroll views I think does a really nice job. The last thing I want to do today is I want to be able to go back. So I'd really like to be able to click on Done to go back. I guess the other thing that I'd like to do is I'd like to make it present a little better. So instead of just like appearing here, I want to at least make it appear with some type of transition. You know what, that's actually enough work that maybe we should do that tomorrow. Let's go ahead and cut this video lecture off here. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to make it show up prettier, and then after that we're going to make it go away. And so we'll pick up from here tomorrow. We've already done enough today. See you guys next time.